There was a time when Sarah's laughter lit up a room and felt like home. Lately, it felt more like static in the background, always present, but no longer meant for me. It started with a text message, one of those mass invites from Greg and Lila, our mutual friends who were far too rich and far too bored. Cocktail night. Dress to impress. Let's pretend we're not falling apart for one night. Greg always had a flair for brutal honesty disguised as charm. I showed Sarah the message while we were brushing our teeth. She was in her silk robe, that deep emerald one that always clung to her in all the right ways. She barely glanced at the phone. "Do you want to go?" I shrugged, spitting into the sink. "We haven't been out in a while." "We've been busy," she muttered, smearing on her night cream. "Work's been insane." She didn't meet my eyes. She hadn't met my eyes in weeks. But I said yes. Not because I wanted to socialize, or dress up, or make fake smiles while Greg served overpriced bourbon like it was liquid gold. I said yes because I was trying. Still trying. Maybe foolishly. When Friday arrived, I came home from work to find Sarah already dressed. And that's when the first punch landed, without her saying a word. She looked incredible. Not put on a nice dress, incredible. This was first date, incredible. Her hair was curled in loose waves, lips painted a soft crimson I hadn't seen in years, and a deep sapphire dress hugged her in ways I hadn't touched in months. Her perfume hit me like nostalgia and arousal all at once. "You went all out," I said, trying to sound casual, but something in me tensed. That familiar tightness, like bracing for a blow you can't see coming. She barely looked up from the mirror. "It's a cocktail party." Still, I reached for her hand as we walked out the door. She let me hold it, but it felt like I was gripping a memory. Greg's place was packed, as usual. Soft jazz filtered through the speakers, glasses clinked, and laughter filled the air. The kind of party where everyone had something to prove but pretended they didn't. We mingled, smiled, drank. I laughed at stories I didn't care about and nodded at people I didn't recognize. And the whole time, I watched Sarah. She was elsewhere. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, and I saw the way her eyes flicked to the screen like a reflex. The way she subtly turned her body when reading messages. She smiled, absent-mindedly, a secret smirk, and quickly stashed it away. "Everything okay?" I asked, leaning in. She blinked, like she forgot I was there. "Yeah, work stuff. Just checking in with a client. At 9 p.m. on a Friday?" But I let it go. What was I going to say? That I felt like a ghost next to her? That something about tonight felt scripted, and I didn't know my lines? It was when we got our drinks that I noticed her doing it again. She was scanning the room, not aimlessly, but intentionally. Like she was waiting for someone. I followed her gaze. And that's when I saw him. Tall, clean-shaven, sharp blue eyes, and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He looked like the kind of guy who still wore cologne and meant it. He was standing by the fireplace, sipping a whiskey, and when his eyes met Sarah's, the smile that spread across his face was unmistakable. And hers? Lit up like Christmas. She touched my arm too casually. "Oh wow, I didn't know he'd be here." "Who?" I asked, already knowing I'd hate the answer. "Dylan. Dylan Crawford. We went to college together." Ah, that name. That name I'd heard once or twice, always in the tone people reserve for unfinished business. "You've never mentioned him before." Didn't think it mattered. She smiled again, too wide, and walked straight toward him before I could respond. I stood there, holding both our drinks, watching as she slid into a version of herself I hadn't seen in years, laughing, tilting her head, touching his arm lightly as she spoke. I could feel it. That subtle heat between two people who had once tasted each other and maybe never quite lost the flavor. They stood too close. They smiled too easily. And I just stood there, invisible. When she returned, 10 minutes later, her cheeks were flushed. She took the drink I handed her and said nothing about him. Just moved on to another conversation. Another round of laughter. But I saw it all. The way her fingers trembled when she touched her phone again. The way she glanced toward the hallway, toward the back of the house. The way she avoided my gaze when I touched her lower back. I leaned in again. "Are you sure you're okay?" She turned to me then, finally locking eyes. And for the briefest second, I saw it. Guilt. Then it vanished, replaced by a practiced smile. "Of course I am. Just a lot of people here. A lot of catching up." I nodded, but I already knew. Something was happening, and it had nothing to do with me. I don't know what I expected when I agreed to come to this party. Maybe I thought the old spark between Sarah and me would flicker back to life, caught in the right lighting, with the right buzz from overpriced cocktails. But watching her with Dylan, that spark didn't flicker. It choked. It started subtle. The way her body leaned in toward him, as if pulled by gravity. The way her laughter dropped an octave when she spoke to him. She wasn't just happy to see an old friend, she was glowing. Animated in a way I hadn't seen in months. I sipped my drink and watched them from across the room. She placed a hand lightly on his chest when she laughed, fingertips that used to trace circles on mine beneath our sheets now brushing across his tailored shirt. He had that effortless charm, the kind that made men hate him on sight. Confident without trying. Too good-looking to be humble about it. When Sarah turned to introduce us, I felt like I was being asked to shake hands with a version of my own inadequacy. "Dylan, this is my husband, Aaron," she said, her voice high and bright. My husband. That word felt like a punchline. Like a role I was playing in a story she'd already rewritten. Dylan extended a hand. "Aaron, great to meet you, man. Sarah's told me a lot about you." I smiled tightly as we shook hands. "Funny. She hasn't said much about you." He chuckled, but his eyes didn't flinch. "Yeah, we go way back. Sarah and I were kind of inseparable for a while, weren't we?" Sarah laughed, nervously, I thought, and swirled her drink. "College years. You know how it is." "Yeah, I did." I also knew the look two people gave each other when they remembered how each other tasted. The three of us chatted for a bit. He talked about some real estate development he was managing out in Sonoma, how he was back in town temporarily, how he just happened to reconnect with Greg through a mutual contact. The coincidences piled up too neatly. Sarah kept her hand near her glass, but her eyes kept drifting toward him. They drifted again later, this time with her body. I'd gone to grab us another round. The bar was crowded, the line slow. When I turned around, she wasn't where I left her. I found her 10 minutes later, by the balcony with Dylan, their faces bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. His hand rested casually on the railing, dangerously close to brushing hers. Her whole posture was open, like she was waiting for him to close the space. When I walked up, Sarah stepped back, barely. But I noticed. Dylan raised his glass. "Beautiful view, huh?" "Yeah," I said, eyes on my wife. "Depends what you're looking at." Sarah looked flustered. "I was just showing him that old photo from junior year. Remember that Halloween party?" I didn't remember. I wasn't there. "Oh yeah," Dylan smirked. "You were dressed as a sexy Cleopatra, and I was a toga-wearing Caesar with beer spilled down my chest. I remember I lost my shoes that night." Sarah giggled, then turned to me. I ended up walking home barefoot. Dylan carried me halfway back to the dorm. Her voice had that softness it used to have when she'd recall some sweet memory with me. But this one didn't include me. It wasn't ours. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was flotation soaked in memory. Eventually, the party moved indoors. Greg announced something obnoxious like karaoke and truffle fries in the kitchen. People laughed and shuffled away. Sarah and Dylan lingered just a second longer before following. I stayed behind, letting the breeze cool the heat rising in my chest. The sun had gone down. The golden glow was gone. In its place, shadows stretched long across the backyard. I felt like one of them, unseen, background noise in my own life. When I finally went inside, Sarah was nowhere to be found. I scanned the room, bathroom, kitchen, hallway. Nothing. A few of Greg's friends, people I barely knew, were talking by the island. One of them looked up at me. "Hey, your wife and that guy, Dylan?" They said they were heading out for a bit. Just to catch up. My mouth went dry. They left. The woman nodded, sipping from her wine glass. "Yeah. He said he wanted to show her something around the corner. Old college hangout or something. Show her something. Catch up. No phone call. No check-in. No explanation. Just gone." For the next hour, I stood in that house with a drink I didn't taste and a room full of people I didn't recognize. People laughed and danced and played drunk versions of karaoke, and I stood at the edge of it all, staring at the door. She didn't come back. I checked my phone. Nothing. I told myself maybe she just needed a moment. Maybe they were just catching up. But deep in my gut, where instinct lives and denial dies, I knew. She had already left, and I wasn't sure if she was coming back. I don't remember much about the last half hour at Greg's place. It all blurred together, clinking glasses, muffled laughter, music that sounded too upbeat for how I felt inside. I kept telling myself not to jump to conclusions. They probably just went out for air, or maybe ran into someone they knew. But the longer she stayed gone, the louder the silence got inside me. I checked my phone again. Nothing. No text. No call. No, "Hey, be right back." Not even a drunk emoji. I stepped out front, scanning the street. Cars lined the curb, couples stumbled into ride shares, Headlights blinked in and out. No sign of Sarah. No sign of Dylan. She hadn't even taken her jacket. I dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. I sent a quick text. Where are you? 3 dots didn't appear. Just stillness. Digital silence. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. The clock on Greg's wall ticked so loud it felt like a countdown. And I swear, with every tick, my chest got tighter. I wandered back inside. People were laughing, now singing off-key in the kitchen. The energy was high, the air thick with perfume, alcohol, and the illusion that everything was fine. I wasn't. Greg found me in the hallway. Yo, Aaron, man, you good? I nodded too fast. Yeah. Have you seen Sarah? He tilted his head. I think she left with that guy. Dylan? She didn't say anything to me, I muttered. Greg frowned. That's weird. They were just saying they were going to catch up for a few. Thought you were with them. I wanted to believe that. Really, I did. But there was a hollow space in my gut that said otherwise. I sat on the back porch alone for 20 minutes after that. Let the cold night air crawl through my shirt and settle on my skin. The whiskey in my glass had gone warm, untouched. I kept staring at my phone, like maybe if I looked hard enough, I could will a message into existence. Eventually, I left. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out of the house like a man leaving a funeral, shoulders heavy, jaw clenched, each step unsure of its purpose. The night swallowed the streets in quiet. I drove with one hand on the wheel, the other gripping my phone, refreshing the screen like it would make a difference. Still nothing. No Sarah. And no Dylan. I imagined her in his car, laughing like she used to laugh with me. Him touching her knee at a stoplight. Her leaning over to whisper something in his ear. Her breath warm on his skin. It played like a reel in my mind, and I hated that I couldn't stop it. I hated even more that part of me still hoped I was wrong. I sat in our driveway for 10 minutes before finally going inside. The house was still, dark, and painfully clean. Her jacket was still on the coat rack. Her heels by the front door. I walked past them without touching either. In the kitchen, her favorite wine glass sat in the drying rack. Lipstick stains still clinging to the rim. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaled, and leaned against the counter. And I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. I sat on the couch, staring at the black TV screen like it owed me answers. My phone sat face up on the coffee table, mocking me with its blank screen. Every sound outside, every car door, every headlight sweeping past the blinds made my heart stutter. At 1:42 a.m., I sent another text. Are you okay? Nothing. Just let me know you're safe. Still nothing. My chest burned. My throat felt dry. It was that kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it presses against you. Sits on your shoulders. Whispers all the things you don't want to hear. I thought about calling Dylan. I pulled up Sarah's Instagram instead, scrolling back through pictures of us. Her holding my arm, smiling at a winery in Napa, toes buried in sand, her head on my shoulder. But even in those pictures, I started to notice it, the slight distance in her eyes. The way she was there, but not really. Had she been slipping away for longer than I realized? I didn't cry. Not yet. But something inside me cracked. Quietly. The way a floorboard does when it finally gives in to weight. I left the living room light on and went upstairs. Slipped into bed fully dressed. And stared at the ceiling like it might give me answers. She still wasn't home by the time the sun started bleeding into the blinds. The house smelled like her shampoo, but not her. There's a special kind of silence that only exists between two people who used to be everything to each other. And when one of them doesn't come home, that silence gets louder, heavier. It doesn't echo, it crushes. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, fully clothed, unmoving. The clock on the nightstand read 3:07 a.m. I'd stopped checking it regularly after the second hour. But now and then, my eyes would drift to it like muscle memory. I still hadn't heard from her. No buzz. No vibration. Just the cold, rectangular silence of a phone that used to carry her voice and now held nothing but void. I imagined every scenario I could, each more desperate than the last. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she ran into someone else, lost track of time. Maybe she was drunk. Maybe she needed a ride and forgot to ask me. Maybe she was in trouble. Maybe. Or maybe she was exactly where she wanted to be. That was the thought I kept pushing away. But it kept crawling back in. Around 3:30, I went downstairs. Couldn't take the stillness of the bed anymore. The sheets beside me were untouched, smooth. Her pillow still held the faint smell of lavender conditioner. I poured myself a drink. Something strong, but not enough to knock me out. I didn't want sleep. Not really. I just wanted answers. A clue. A trace. I sat on the couch in the dark, the light from the street lamp bleeding in through the curtains. It cast long, soft shadows across the hardwood floor, places we used to dance barefoot after too much wine, where she once kissed me without warning while music played low on a Saturday night. That memory didn't feel like mine anymore, like it belonged to someone else. A different couple, a version of us that hadn't fractured yet. The silence gnawed at me. I checked her location through the Find My Phone app. Disabled. That hurt more than it should have. She hadn't just vanished. She'd chosen to. By 4:12 a.m., my mind was a hurricane. I started thinking in fragments. Where did she go? What did he say to her? What did she say back? Did she touch his hand first? Did she want this? Was this planned? Was I just the fool standing in the background of a story she'd already rewritten without telling me? There was a pit in my stomach that wouldn't go away. A slow burn, like acid eating through steel. My throat felt dry no matter how many sips I took. And my heart. It wasn't racing. It was waiting, beating slowly, deliberately, like it knew something was over, but hadn't been told yet. Sometime around 5 a.m., I wandered into the guest room. Not because I couldn't sleep in our bed, but because I could. And that felt worse. I lay on the edge of the guest bed, surrounded by unpacked boxes from the last closet purge Sarah had started but never finished. Her spring wardrobe sat in a half-unzipped bag by the wall. Light blouses, heels she hadn't worn since last year, and that one sundress I used to love watching her peel off, strand by strand of sunlight on her skin. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I let myself drift. Not to sleep, but to memory. To the way she used to trace circles on my chest as we drifted off. To the sound of her humming as she made coffee in the morning. To the way her eyes softened when they met mine across a crowded room. That version of her hadn't been around in a long time. At 6:21 a.m., I heard it. The sound of tires on gravel. Then, the soft slam of a car door. The unmistakable clink of her keys. The front door creaked open. I didn't move. Not at first. My hands clenched the bed sheets. My eyes stared at the ceiling. My breath caught, waiting for a voice. A footstep. But all I heard was the slow rustle of her moving through the house. Delicate, hesitant, almost ashamed. Then nothing. Not even the sound of her climbing the stairs. Just stillness again. I finally stood and moved to the top of the staircase, just enough to see the hallway. And there she was, sitting at the foot of the couch, her heels dangling from her hand, her hair slightly tangled, her dress wrinkled. She looked like the ghost of the woman I married. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't even look toward the stairs. She just sat there, rubbing her temples like the weight of the night was finally catching up to her. I didn't speak, didn't walk down, didn't ask her where she'd been. I just stood there, letting the silence between us finish what neither of us had the courage to say out loud. The sun had only just started rising when I saw her stand from the couch. She moved like someone trying not to make noise, though there was no one left to wake. Just me, already awake, already watching. I stayed at the top of the stairs, hidden behind the railing, silent. She slipped off her heels, barefoot now, and padded quietly toward the front door. Her hand hovered over the handle for a moment, like she wasn't sure if she should leave again or if she just needed the fresh air. I don't know what she chose, because I turned and walked back into the bedroom before she could decide. I didn't want to see her go. And worse, I didn't want to see her stay. When I woke again, it was mid-morning. I hadn't planned to fall asleep. I guess the body eventually collapses under the weight of emotional exhaustion, even if the mind refuses to shut up. I pulled myself out of bed with slow, mechanical movements. The sun was slicing through the blinds in sharp streaks. The house was still. I walked downstairs. She was gone. Again. No note. No text. Just her scent in the air, faint, floral, familiar, and deeply unwelcome now. I stood in the kitchen, letting that ache pulse behind my sternum. Then I grabbed my keys, drove to the hardware store, and bought new locks. Deadbolt. Reinforced. Not because I wanted to be dramatic, because I needed a line in the sand. I came back home and changed the locks without hesitating. Each click of the drill felt like a statement. You don't get to disappear without consequence. By noon, the locks were in place. By 12:15, I stood behind the front door and stared at it like it had become a wall instead of an entrance. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I felt like I was nailing shut a coffin on something I used to believe in. She came back just after dawn the next day. I heard her car before I saw her. That soft, familiar engine hum of her silver CRV. I watched from the upstairs window, partially hidden behind the curtain, heart steady. Eyes sharper than they'd been in weeks. She walked up to the door, phone in hand, sunglasses hiding half her face, hair tied back in a messy knot. Her purse dangled from one shoulder, and she carried herself like someone who didn't know what to expect. She tried the handle, and paused. She jiggled it again. Knocked, then louder. Aaron. Her voice was small through the door. Aaron, are you there? More knocking. A desperate rhythm now. Aaron, the door's not working. Did you change the locks? I didn't answer. I watched her from above, unmoving. She stepped back, blinking up at the window, trying to see in, maybe wondering if I was watching. I was. She looked so different from the woman who had glowed by Dylan's side the night of the party. Her makeup was smudged. Her lips chapped. Her blouse clung to her like she'd worn it too long. She looked real. Exposed. Please talk to me, she called up. Still, I didn't answer. She pulled out her phone. A second later, mine buzzed on the table behind me. Please. Just open the door. Let's talk. I messed up. I know I did. Just let me in. Another message came. I was stupid. I needed something I thought I'd lost. But I didn't want to lose you. Please. Aaron, don't do this. I stared at the screen. The words felt hollow, like a cup that had already been emptied and tipped over. There was a time when her apologies could undo anything. A single tear from her, and I'd drop every wall I'd built. But not now. Not after she left me in a room full of strangers while she caught up with a man who knew her better than I did. Not after that long, cold night wondering what bed she was lying in. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, and typed one reply. Not today. No explanation. No emotion. Just those two words. Outside, I heard her breath catch. Another knock. Weaker now. Then silence. Then footsteps retreating down the front steps. Then the engine. Then, nothing. I stayed at the window until I was sure she was gone. I don't know how long I stood there, but I know what I felt. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just the slow, inevitable collapse of something sacred. And maybe, just maybe, a flicker of clarity. I didn't know where we stood now, but I knew this. She was on the outside. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was the one being left behind. She came back later that day. Not like before, sneaking up quietly, uncertain. This time she parked boldly in the driveway, got out slowly, and walked to the front door with purpose. The kind of purpose someone has when they've decided it's time to say something, whether or not it gets heard. I saw her through the peephole. No sunglasses. No makeup. Just Sarah, stripped of the armor she always wore. Her eyes were red, her face puffy, like she'd spent hours trying to cry herself back into the version of herself she thought I wanted. The knock was soft, almost respectful. Aaron, can we talk? I didn't move right away. Didn't answer. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, pulse steady, breath shallow. I'm not here to fight, she said. I'm not going to make excuses. I need to talk to you. I opened the door. Slowly. She flinched when our eyes met. No welcome. No embrace. Just the open door and the space between us. 5 minutes, I said. She stepped inside, like she was entering a stranger's home. She sat on the couch, the same couch she had curled into me on 100 nights. The same couch I stared at empty just 2 nights before, while she was out with him. I stayed standing. She looked up at me like a child caught with broken glass in her hands. I didn't plan it, she started. I raised a hand. Spare me the cliché. Her lips parted, then shut again. A long breath escaped her. I know. I deserve that. Deserve worse. I know that too. Silence. She stared at her hands for a moment. Twisted the ring she still hadn't taken off. It wasn't about sex, she said. I snorted. She flinched again. I mean, yes, it happened. That night. But it wasn't about that. Not really. I kept my arms crossed. Then what was it, Sarah? Enlighten me. Because from where I stood, it looked a hell of a lot like you left with another man and didn't come back. Her eyes welled up. I didn't know what I was doing. Dylan. He's from a time in my life when I felt alive. And lately, I've felt like I've been sleepwalking. So you wanted to feel alive again, I said, venom creeping into my voice. And the only way to do that was with him? I wasn't looking for him. He was just there. And when I saw him, something clicked. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. I stared at her. And you thought, what the hell, let's destroy my marriage over it. That about right? No, she snapped, then immediately looked ashamed. I mean, no. I didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed once. Cold. You don't accidentally climb into someone else's bed, Sarah. That's not something you trip and fall into. I didn't sleep with him before I left the party, she said. We went somewhere quiet. Talked. Caught up. Where? His car. Then what? She swallowed. We drove. Talked. Parked somewhere. I kissed him. It felt like I was 20 again. And I just didn't want it to end. So you didn't come home. She nodded. I stayed the night. I stepped back. There it was. No more room for denial. No more room for hope. I didn't plan it, she said again, softer this time. But I didn't stop it either. I sat in the armchair across from her. My legs suddenly heavy. Do you love him? No. Do you love me? Silence. She didn't answer fast. And that told me more than words ever could. I did, she whispered. I still do. I think. But I'm so confused. That's not love, I said flatly. That's guilt. She covered her mouth, like she could push the sob back in. I was drowning, she said through her hands. You were always so steady, so solid. And I started feeling like I was fading. I needed to feel something. And you thought sleeping with your ex would solve that? I thought he'd remind me of who I was, she said. Before the mortgage. Before bills. Before dinner plans and tax seasons and being too tired for sex. I didn't want him, Aaron. I just wanted to feel like someone wanted me. I stared at her. And in that moment, I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger wearing her face, sitting on the couch where she used to curl into me after long days, begging for the kind of understanding I no longer had to give. I'm sorry, she said. I know I fucked up. And if you hate me, I'll understand. But I needed to tell you the truth. You didn't tell me the truth, I said quietly. You let me feel crazy. For weeks. You let me watch it fall apart and hoped I wouldn't notice. You gaslit me. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I didn't know how to stop it. You stop it by coming home. She sobbed then. Not soft, gentle tears, but deep, guttural ones. The kind that come from knowing something precious just slipped through your fingers for good. I stood. Her eyes snapped to mine. Please don't leave. I'm not leaving, I said. You already did. I didn't cry after she left. Not right away, at least. I sat back down on the couch where she'd been moments before, the cushion still warm from her body. The smell of her perfume hung in the air like a ghost that refused to leave. That citrus and vanilla blend I used to love, now it made my stomach turn. I should have felt relief. The confrontation was over. The truth had been spilled out like wine on white carpet, staining everything it touched. But what came wasn't relief. It was silence. Not just around me. Inside me. The house was still hers in all the ways that mattered. Her toothbrush still sat in the holder beside mine. Her sweater was draped over the back of the kitchen chair, sleeves dangling like limp arms. Her favorite coffee mug, white with a chipped handle and the words, "But first, coffee," was drying upside down on the rack. The imprint of her still clung to every room. I walked through the house slowly, noticing things I'd trained myself not to see before. The slight indentation in the bed where she used to sleep. The way her slippers sat perfectly aligned under the nightstand. The calendar in the hallway still had her notes scrawled across it in pink ink: book club, yoga, dinner with Lila. Lila. I wondered if Lila knew. If Greg knew. If any of them had seen it coming before I did. That thought twisted something inside me. I didn't just lose a partner. I lost trust in the world we built together. Friends started calling a few days later. Not many. Just the usual suspects. Hey man, haven't seen you in a while. Everything good? I didn't know how to answer that. Do you say, yeah, everything's fine, when you wake up in a house that feels like a museum of someone else's life? Do you say, no, and invite them into a story you haven't fully processed yourself? Mostly, I said nothing. Let the calls ring out. Let the voicemails pile up like unopened letters from a life I used to recognize. She texted 3 days after that last conversation. Can we talk again? I miss you. I miss us. I stared at the message for 10 minutes before deleting it. Not out of anger, but because I didn't trust myself not to reply. Every morning became a test. I'd walk into the kitchen, reach for the coffee pot, and find myself staring at her mug. I started making just 1 cup instead of 2. At night, I'd reach for the remote and instinctively look to my left to ask her what she wanted to watch, only to remember she wasn't there. I stopped going into the bedroom during the day, started sleeping on the couch. The bed felt too intimate, too wrong. It still smelled like her hair and the lotion she used on her legs before crawling under the sheets. I knew I could throw her stuff in a box, strip the place of her presence. People told me that's what you do when it ends. Pack it up. Move on. But I wasn't ready to move on. I wasn't even sure I'd started to move at all. I found her journal one evening, tucked in the back of her desk drawer. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. The entries were short. Fragments, mostly. I feel like I'm disappearing. Aaron's a good man. A solid man. But do I still love him? Dylan asked me today if I'd ever just leave. I couldn't answer him. Am I a terrible person for wanting more than this? He doesn't look at me the way he used to. Or maybe, I don't. I stopped reading after that. Not because it hurt. Because it confirmed what I already feared. She was gone before Dylan ever showed up. One night, maybe 2 weeks after the confrontation, I found myself standing in front of our bedroom door. Hand on the knob. Frozen. I stood there for a full minute. Then opened it. The room looked untouched. Her pillow still fluffed. Her dresser still lined with jewelry she hadn't taken with her. I moved to the closet, pulled it open. Her dresses still hung in perfect color-coded order. But her perfume was gone. Her favorite earrings missing. So was the small bag I watched her pack once when we went away for the weekend. The one she said she only used for things that mattered. It hit me then. She hadn't just run off that night. She'd been preparing to leave long before that party. Little by little. Decision by decision. Smile by fading smile. I didn't respond to her second message either. Or the third. She called once. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice trembled as she said, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll let me try. I couldn't even listen to the whole thing. Deleted it mid-sentence. The house still looked the same, but it didn't feel like home anymore. And neither did she. I wasn't expecting company that day. It was a Thursday. Overcast. The kind of gray that makes everything feel a little heavier, like the sky's pressing down on your thoughts. I'd just gotten back from a run, hoping the miles would clear my head the way whiskey no longer could. I was halfway through a protein shake when I heard the knock. 3 soft raps. Not urgent. Not familiar. I glanced through the blinds and stopped cold. Dylan, standing on my front step like someone who thought this was a good idea. He wore a clean button-down, jeans too crisp to be casual. His hands were buried in his pockets, his stance calm. But I saw the shift in his eyes when he caught movement behind the curtain. I opened the door just enough to make sure he knew I wasn't smiling. He nodded once. Aaron, what the hell do you want? I just want 5 minutes. That's it. I'll leave right after. You've already taken more than that. I know. He looked down, then back up. But I'd like to explain something. Not excuses. Just the truth. I let him stand there for another breath. Then I stepped aside. He walked in like someone stepping into a church after a long absence. Quiet, cautious, knowing he didn't belong. He didn't sit. Just stood near the entryway, hands still tucked away, eyes drifting across the living room. I watched him look at the photo frames lining the hallway. Our wedding, the trip to Florence, Sarah laughing on a vineyard hill in Napa. He cleared his throat, but his voice was steady. When Sarah introduced us at the party, I knew you were her husband. I raised an eyebrow. Good start. So what's the rest? She told me later that night, after we left, that you two were separated, living together out of convenience, trying to figure out if the marriage was salvageable. I stared at him. That was the story? He nodded. She made it sound like things were already over. Like it was just paperwork at that point. I asked her if she was sure. She said yes. And you believed her. He looked at me square in the eyes. I wanted to. There it was. Not denial. Not even defense. Just ugly, selfish honesty. You know, I said, walking a few steps toward him, you could have asked me. Could have pulled me aside at the party. You looked me in the eye, Dylan. I didn't think it was my place. No, you didn't want it to be your place. That would have made it real. He swallowed, but didn't look away. I didn't come here to beg forgiveness, he said. I just wanted to own my part in it. I thought the marriage was ending. I still shouldn't have gotten involved. That's on me. Yeah, it is. He nodded again, slower this time. She's not doing great, you know. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, he said. It's supposed to make you understand that she regrets it. I exhaled hard through my nose, trying not to laugh bitterly. She regrets it, I repeated. She talks about you constantly, Dylan said. Says she made the biggest mistake of her life. She made a choice, I snapped. She didn't fall into bed with you. She walked there. He looked down, silent. And you helped her build that story. The one where I was already gone. The one where she wasn't betraying someone, just moving on. I didn't mean to. You did, I said, sharp now. You meant to take what wasn't yours and convince yourself it was already broken. Don't stand here and pretend like it was an accident. That landed. He rubbed the back of his neck. You're right. I didn't want to hear his voice anymore. Didn't want to see his guilt-laced empathy or his nice guy expression, the one that probably made Sarah remember being young and stupid and full of want. Leave, I said. He nodded and turned to the door. But just before opening it, he said without looking back, if there's any part of you that still loves her, talk to her. At least to end it clean. I didn't respond. I watched the door close behind him, and the silence settle like dust on old furniture. I stood in the hallway for a long time, eyes drifting to the photos again. One of them showed Sarah in my arms, forehead pressed to mine, both of us smiling like we had it all figured out. I took the frame off the wall, held it for a moment, and then flipped it face down on the table. Some things don't need to be displayed anymore. She called 3 times before I finally picked up. It had been 2 weeks since Dylan showed up at my door. 2 weeks of silence, of days passing like gray smoke, of nights that didn't end so much as fade into dawn. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I knew it wasn't her. Still, something in her voice that day sounded different. Not desperate. Not rehearsed. Just tired. Can we talk? One last time. So I said yes. Not because I wanted her back. Because I didn't want to carry the weight of not knowing anymore. She came in the late afternoon. Same car. Same hesitant steps. But this time, she wasn't trying to reclaim something. She was letting it go. She wore jeans and a plain sweater. No perfume. No makeup. No show. When I opened the door, she looked older than she had in months. Like the guilt had finally settled on her skin and made itself comfortable. Hi, she said. I stepped aside. Let her in. No hug. No warmth. Just a gesture. She stood in the living room for a second, looking around like she didn't quite recognize the house anymore. Her eyes flicked to the hallway where the photos used to hang. Most of them were gone now, tucked into a box in the closet. One frame still sat face down on the hallway table. She noticed. Didn't say anything. Just sat down on the couch. I stayed standing. She took a breath. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not here to try to fix this. I nodded. I want to be honest. Finally. Okay. I said. Let's have it. She closed her eyes for a second, then began. When I saw Dylan again, something in me cracked open. It wasn't about him. Not really. It was about who I used to be. Who I was before the mortgage, before the routines, before I started waking up next to you and wondering if that was it. That's what you thought? That this, us, was it? She flinched. I know how that sounds. But it wasn't about not loving you. I did. I do. But I felt like I'd faded into someone I didn't recognize. And Dylan reminded me of the girl who used to feel alive. Desired. Not just loved, but wanted. I let the words hang. Heavy. Honest. Hollow. So you ran to nostalgia, I said quietly. Instead of talking to me. She nodded. Yes. I shook my head, pacing slowly in the room. You didn't just cheat on me, Sarah. You abandoned me. You made me question my own eyes. My instincts. You made me feel like I was going crazy, while you were rebuilding your youth with someone else. I know, she whispered, tears gathering. And I hate myself for that. I see it now. I felt it when I saw your face the morning after. The locks. The silence. I knew then what I'd really done. And yet here we are, I said. Still talking. Like there's something left to say. She wiped her eyes. There is. One thing. I waited. I wasn't unhappy because of you. I was unhappy because I stopped putting effort into us. I let the magic die and then blamed you for the darkness. I used Dylan as a mirror. But he was never what I wanted. Then what did you want? I asked. A fling? An escape? A way out? She swallowed. I think. I wanted a reason. To feel justified in walking away from something I wasn't brave enough to fix. There it was. The thing I didn't know I'd needed to hear. Not that it excused her, but it explained her. And somehow that mattered. I'm not the same man I was 2 months ago, I said, voice calm now. I don't love you the way I did then. Maybe I still love the version of you that used to sit on this couch and kiss me just because, but not this version. Not the one who ran. Her lips trembled. So this is goodbye? Yeah, it is. She nodded, standing slowly. Can I hug you? I paused, then nodded once. We embraced. Softly. Briefly. She smelled like rain and tears. And it didn't ignite anything in me. Just the final confirmation that we were done. When we pulled apart, she looked at me through glassy eyes. Thank you, she whispered. For the years. For the love. For listening. I opened the door. She walked through it without looking back, and I closed it with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long, long time. That night, I poured myself a drink and stood at the window. The wind rustled the trees outside. The street was quiet. My phone didn't buzz. No more texts. No more apologies. Just silence. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt like freedom. The mornings feel different now. Not better, not always, but clearer. There's no weight pressing down on my chest when I open my eyes. No second of confusion. No wondering if she's next to me. The bed is just a bed now, not a battlefield. Just mine. I've started making the coffee before the sun rises. It's quieter that way. No background noise. No footsteps down the hallway. No hum of her morning podcast or the soft clink of her ring against the mug. Just me. The sound of the kettle. The faint creak of the house settling into its silence. And strangely, it feels good. Like peace disguised as loneliness. A few weeks after Sarah's last visit, I repainted the bedroom. The walls used to be a pale blue she picked out years ago. Soothing, she called it. But it had become something else in my mind, sterile, muted, like a color trying not to be noticed. I went for something warmer. A soft, dusty green. It sounds small, but it felt like reclaiming something. I donated the rest of her clothes. The jewelry. The half-used lotions and perfume bottles in the bathroom cabinet. I kept one or two things in a box in the attic, not because I needed to hold on, but because some part of me understood that grief doesn't like being erased. It likes being honored and then let go. The photos? Most are gone from the walls now, but one still sits tucked in the drawer of my nightstand. Her laughing in the rain, coat soaked, hands in the air like she was dancing. I don't hate that memory. I just don't live there anymore. I adopted a dog. A rescue lab mix with too much energy and a lopsided ear. His name's Finn. He chews the corners of my couch and sleeps with his head on my feet, and I swear he knows when I need the room quiet. It's strange, having a creature that just wants to be near you. No expectations. No drama. Just presence. He's taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn. Love doesn't have to be complicated to be real. People started coming around again, once word got out. Lila dropped by one evening with a bottle of red and a cautious smile. She didn't ask questions. Just poured 2 glasses and said, to breathing again. And we did. Friends called. Invited me out. I said yes more than I used to. Said no when I meant it. Started showing up for myself the way I always showed up for others. I even joined a weekend hiking group. The kind of thing I'd always meant to do but never had time for. Turns out the trail is a hell of a place to forget someone and to find yourself again. Sarah texted once more. Just one line. I hope you're okay. I really do. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. Because I was okay. And she didn't need to be part of that. There's a girl I met on one of those hikes. Aubrey. She laughs too loud and talks with her hands. She doesn't know much about what I've been through, and I don't feel the urge to spill it all out at once. She just listens when I speak. Smiles when I look at her. She hasn't asked me to be anything yet, and that feels like more than enough. We've had coffee. Shared silence on a trail. Laughed about nothing. I don't know where it's going, but for once, I'm not looking ahead, trying to force meaning into every moment. I'm just here, breathing. This morning, I stood on the front porch with Finn at my feet and coffee in hand. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in streaks of peach and gold. The kind of light that makes even the ugliest days feel like they never happened. It was quiet, peaceful, whole. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the echo of her absence. I felt the presence of something else. Something I'd almost forgotten I deserved. Myself. And as the sun rose higher, warming the edge of the world, I took a deep breath and stepped forward.